American football is one of the most watched and played sports in the United States. Although many fans enjoy watching football, the players are putting themselves at high risk of brain injury. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, is a neurodegenerative disease that has been diagnosed in many former contact sport athletes, military combat veterans, and other individuals exposed to repetitive head impacts. Due to the way it is caused, football players have become highly susceptible to this disease, which impact to the head being a common occurrence in football. CTE has been linked to a host of symptoms, including memory loss, depression, aggressive behavior, and sometimes suicidal thoughts. With how prevalent CTE is, it's important we understand and research the impact on football players. Since CTE was discovered in football players by forensic pathologist Dr. Bennett Amulu in 2002, it sparked the beginning of CTE testing in deceased NFL players.
After their deaths. The first of which was Mike Webster, who died in 2002 at the age of 50, and he is said to have died from a heart attack, but later they found that he did actually have CTE. He was said to be a very happy and enjoyable dude by his teammates while he was playing, and then they said that throughout his career he slowly became extremely depressed, and he would randomly start losing his memory, got divorced, he stopped eating, and then he started sleeping in his car and no one knows why. And then that basically was just the spiral down, and he ended up dying, as I said. And then the next was a former Philadelphia Eagles defensive back named Andre Waters, and he randomly one day in 2006 went out on his pool deck and shot himself in the head with a .32 caliber pistol, just completely randomly. And he, throughout his entire NFL career, was always trying to be corrected by his coaches because he always led with his head while hitting. And he actually got a nickname called Dirty Waters because of his aggressive style of playing. And even his coaches, when he was young, knew that this wasn't going to be good for him later in his life. And so did his brother. And his brother would actually come out and say that the reason he died was because of football. And he was also a very good person. He was known to be a generous friend and a loving son to his mother. And then randomly, he would get major depression and would, as I said, walk out and just kill himself. And these two were basically two of the first examples when they first started finding CTE in NFL players.
So the first studies on the timeline of CTE development began in May of 2000, where progress towards the knowledge we have today around CTE was presented in an annual meeting of the American Academy of Neurology, presented by Dr. Barry Jordan and Dr. Julian Bales, where they presented a survey of head injuries in former professional football players. The study was funded by the NFL Players Association, and they surveyed 1,090 former players. According to the survey results, 60% of players had suffered at least one concussion, and 26 reported suffering at least 3 concussions. So while this does not directly show evidence surrounding CTE, it sort of made headway for further research into the exact diagnosis. And as you can see in the article, the doctors reported that their investigation had undertaken a first step in determining the magnitude of the problem among retired players. So this really was the first sort of study that made the public aware of the potential consequences of head injury within NFL lives of NFL players. This study was published by David R. Wire, James S. Jackson, and Amanda Segenia. The survey studied 1,063 players and asked them a broad range of questions aimed at painting a general picture of the retired lives of players post-NFL. While the final report suggested that NFL players did have a very positive experience, the report does acknowledge that the surveyed retirees aged 30 to 49 were 19 times more likely than the general population to have been diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's, and other memory-related diseases. As you can see here, the IED screener shows these players experiencing attacks of anger and other outbursts since retiring. And while this also does not directly relate to the study of CTE, it definitely made headway for the public in further investigating some of the symptoms that are a cause of CTE. Following the 2009 study, in September of 2012, researchers from the CTE Center at Boston University published a study in Brain, a journal of neurology, documenting 15 cases of CTE in the brain of former NFL players. While this wasn't the first to link CTE with ex-NFLers, Amulu observed CTE in the brain of former Steeler and Hall of Famer Mike Webster in 2005. The study more than doubles the number of documented cases in CTE in former football players. And as you can see in the snippet below, it dives into the exact statistical research numbers of the players examined. So while this wasn't the first finding linking CTE to NFL players, the sheer magnitude of the detrimental cases really made headway for more clearly and closely examining the effects of CTE. Following the 2012 study, there were many more studies publishing the effects of CTE. So by July of 2017, the link between football and CTE was well known and widely accepted in the scientific community. Further cementing this study, Boston University CTE Center expanded on its 2012 findings and announced the results of a study of 202 deceased football players' brains. On the 111 brains of former NFL players that were examined, researchers found evidence of CTE in 110. The study looked at brains of players as young as 23 and as old as 89 and included players of all positions. The study also suggested that the longer a football career had, the more severe the case of CTE was, as brains of deceased men who stopped playing had less severe cases than those who played professionally.
Many different groups and scientific fields have been involved in the research around CTE. Specifically, Dr. Ann McKee is a neuropathologist that has examined the brains of 202 deceased football players. Of the 202 players, 111 of them played in the NFL, and 110 of those were found to have chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Dr. McKee, the director of the CTE Center at Boston University, has the largest CTE brain bank in the world. In addition to the 111 brains from those who played in the NFL, researchers also examined brains from the Canadian Football League, semi-professional players, college players, and high school players. Of the 202 brains studied, 87% were found to have CTE. The study found that the high school players had mild cases, while college and professional players showed more severe effects. Dr. McKee's research helped develop a staging system, ranging from mild, stage 1, to most severe, stage 4. Although general trends exist, there isn't a clear list of symptoms within those stages. Stage 1 is the earliest sign of CTE. The lesions are found primarily in the frontal lobe, and symptoms often include slight memory loss. In stage 2, the lesions spread to the adjacent cortex, continuing to affect memory. It also does damage to the frontal lobe, which is to be associated with concentration, cognition, and impulse control issues. Stage 3, in which the lesions have taken over the frontal lobe, affecting the hippocampus, amygdala, and causing impulsive, violent reactions, paranoia, and the erosion of your memory. In stage 4 is when the CTE has spread to multiple parts of the brain. The vast majority of people at this point have been clinically diagnosed with dementia. The National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke has also contributed to the science behind CTE. In April 2013, the NIH launched a major effort to define the pathological characteristics of CTE. With support from the Foundation of Sports Health Research Program and funding from the National Football League, the research was able to advance the neuroimaging techniques so that imaging tools might someday be used to examine for the presence of CTE while the subject is still alive. The neuropathology teams started a process to generate consensus guidelines for the pathological diagnosis of CTE. The consensus allowed researchers to make a more complete picture of CTE and its impacts on football players.
In recent news, ex-NFL receiver Demaryius Thomas died due to a seizure in December of 2021. He was 33 years old at the time of his death, and it was just 6 months after he decided to retire from the NFL. Shortly after his death, Thomas was posthumously diagnosed with stage 2 CTE. After 10 seasons in the NFL, countless years of football before the pros, 2 concussions, and 1 car accident Thomas suffered in 2019, he had his fair share of head trauma. While having experienced 2 concussions is a commonality between many football players, Thomas had also experienced this car crash going at 70 miles per hour and smashing his head through the windshield. After this accident, Thomas reportedly experienced seizures until the time of his death. Stage 2 CTE is commonly associated with progressive behavior, cognitive, and mood abnormalities. Family members say Thomas developed depression, anxiety, panic attacks, and trouble with his memory in the years before his death, since the car accident. Thomas is the most recent ex-NFL player discovered to have CTE, and while improvements were added to the players' helmets to improve safety in the time of Thomas's career, the risk of CTE is certainly still evident for current players. Since the discovery of CTE in 2002, all levels of football, including the NFL, have taken steps to improve the quality of football helmets in hope of preventing the common trend of CTE to continue in players going forward. The newest introduction to the stream of innovations to helmets is the new Riddle Axiom helmet used by few NFL players so far, but most notably Ezekiel Elliott. While there is no official cure for CTE at this time, a new treatment called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide therapy is one of the newer and more effective methods of dealing with the disease. In an article posted by the NAD Treatment Center located in Hammond, Louisiana, it is said that the enzyme NAD has been shown to promote neurogenesis even after trauma. It does this by inducing new positive connections in the brain while neutralizing some of the brain degenerative substances. This slows the progression of the brain's degeneration caused by CTE and enables the patient to be less affected by the inevitable symptoms of the disease. While it remains to be seen if there will ever be an official cure for the disease, more and more research is being done every day, giving us more and more knowledge about the disease. However, developing cures in science labs isn't the only way to combat this disease. Simply spreading awareness and knowledge can go miles towards protecting the millions of football players around the world. Now that you all have a better understanding of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, we hope that you will join us in spreading awareness of this lesser-known disease with the hopes of protecting the athletes we all love to watch. Thank you.